Good evening, ghouls and fiends. Welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror. Oh God, I just suddenly saw the line on the microphone peek out. That's a good sign. I'm your host Tez, and we have our usual tech things going on. Basically, last week at some point I managed to break a connector thingamajiggy on my microphone. Don't know how I did that. Probably, well, it was from messing from it too much, over tightening the little adjustable thing for the position of the microphone. I clearly did that one too many times, and then it just sort of broke, and so the mic was then basically just hanging. And so for the last game stream, which I'll talk about in a moment, I basically had to have it at a high enough angle that it would hang down facing me. And I fear that where I've then been messing with the settings, I may have made the microphone a bit too loud. So if it is a lot louder than usual, do let me know, and I will do my best to adjust it live on the show, because that's how we roll. The long and short of it was I've got a new mic stand, one that just sits on the desk, as opposed to hanging off the side, and I've then just been paranoid that it's too far away, a lot quieter, I don't know. Teething issues. It's all just teething issues. We'll see how it goes. So yeah, we did a bit of a game stream finally. In the week, we finally did a game stream. We did a little bit of Alien Isolation, and surprise, surprise, I didn't get to the point of seeing the alien. Not because I got stuck at the same point that I did when the game first came out on the 360 many years ago. More just because of time. We played for about an hour and didn't get to that point. So still no xenomorph, but I haven't died in it yet. So I count that as a win, I think. I think we're going to go with that. But we played that. We've got a few other things brewing. I am conscious that the mic seems to just be massively spiking, so I will just on air adjust the gain, because I think it's the gain that I have been messing around with. So we'll put the gain down to there. We'll put the gain back down to there, which I think is where it was. So fuck knows. The sound of your mic sounds good. Okay, well, I've just messed with it, so probably it's going to sound bad now. Thanks, Eddie, though, for letting me know. I hope everyone has had a good week in the world of horror. I'm going to get used to having this right in front of me. Whatever you've been doing, whether it's been playing video games, horror video games, watching horror TV, horror films, reading horror books, listening to horror music, whatever you've been up to, I hope you've had a good time. Since the last show, the review-a-thon, haven't watched too much horror, but what I have done is I've caught up on 2 of the 3 films that we will be discussing a bit later on. We are going to be doing a featured presentation, as this is a live show, and that's kind of part and parcel of the plan of the live shows, is having a featured presentation. We will be discussing the Lucio Fulci Gates of Hell trilogy. So if people don't know, Lucio Fulci, revered Italian gore, godfather of gore director, has a thing about eyes. Pretty much all of his films have eyes getting damaged in various nasty ways. We'll talk about that a bit more later on. But he did 3 films that are kind of affectionately linked together through more their theme than story. Notably called the Gates of Hell trilogy. Basically all about openings to hell, bringing the dead to the earth, that sort of thing. That's it in a very, tightened up nutshell. But the main kind of takeaway, I suppose, with Lucio Fulci is the man knows how to do gore. And we'll be talking about those 3 films, my thoughts on them, which one's my favourite, which one's my least favourite, and which one is just in the middle somewhere. We'll go through that, and we do have one review after last week's chock-a-block, massive multi-home run of reviews. I did manage to watch a new film this week. I managed to watch a film called Hellhole, which is new on Shudder. It's a new film from the Addams family, not the Addams family. Don't know if I heard that right. Can't really click properly. The Addams family in that regard, but the family whose surname is Addams that make horror films. we did discuss last year, I believe. We reviewed their film Hellbenders. It's called, or Hellbender, which is another Shudder exclusive. I had mixed feelings on that in terms of there were some parts that I liked in like the final third of the film, but other parts, this kind of garage rock indie sensibility, I felt it felt kind of quite contrasting in themes, and that seems to be a common thing actually, because that's very prevalent in Hellhole, which we will talk about much later on in the show. Prior to that, we do have some news to crack on with, and I think that's kind of it for me and my usual spiel. Nothing new really to discuss. No big updates. Horror-wise, that is anyway. There's always various updates, wedding related things, but we'll save that. We'll save that for another time. Without further ado, Ghouls or Fiends, it's time for the horror news. This is the news. Ho 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 ho. Really should have taken that as a key opportunity to have a swig of beer. Maybe I'll just play a little soundbite.
This is God.
Seamless. It's like I'm a pro. Maybe not. As per usual, Ghouls and Fiends, when it comes to the horror news, all of our news comes from bloodydisgusting.com. Check out their website for all your latest horror news, editorials, reviews. They got it all over there. Check them out. So yeah, sidetracked. First off, we're going to look at some news from John Squires. This relates to Wolfman. There's a teaser trailer now for Leigh Whannell's next Universal Monster movie. Director Leigh Whannell, who did The Invisible Man, returns to the world of Universal Monsters with next year's Wolfman, and the short and sweet teaser trailer has arrived today. From Universal and Blumhouse, Whannell's Wolfman will be howling its way into theatres on January 17th, 2025, and you can watch the first look official teaser down below. The teaser has been unleashed by Universal in the wake of a questionable Halloween Horror Nights costume based on the movie going viral online, though the teaser doesn't actually give us a glimpse of the Wolfman character design. Instead, it effectively sets the mood for a savage werewolf movie through only brief glimpses of Whannell's fresh take on the material. On that note, don't judge a movie by its Halloween Horror Nights costume. Wolfman stars Christopher Abbott as a man whose family is being terrorized by a lethal predator. Golden Globe nominee Christopher Abbott stars as Blake, a San Francisco husband and father who inherits his remote childhood home in rural Oregon after his own father vanishes and is presumed dead. With his marriage to his high-powered wife, Charlotte, played by Emmy Award winner Julia Garner, fraying, Blake persuades Charlotte to take a break from the city and visit the property with their young daughter, Ginger. But as the family approaches the farmhouse in the dead of night, they're attacked by an unseen animal and, in a desperate escape, barricade themselves inside the home as the creature prowls the perimeter. As the night stretches on, however, Blake begins to behave strangely, transforming into something unrecognizable, and Charlotte will be forced to decide whether the terror within their house is more lethal than the danger without. The upcoming horror film co-stars Sam Yeager, Ben Prendergast, and Benedict Harding. The project will mark Whannell's second monster movie and fourth directing collaboration with Blumhouse Productions, after The Invisible Man, Upgrade, and Insidious Chapter 3. Okie dokie piggy pokey. So, if people didn't see it on the world of X, Twitter, earlier this week, the Wolfman, a look at the Wolfman Haunted House for Universal's Halloween Horror Nights, showcased something out of Wrong Turn, the original 6 films or whatever there were. It barely looked like a werewolf. It looked like just some hairy inbred old hick, basically. It didn't look very good, but at the end of the day, with Halloween Horror Nights, I guess if you looked at any of the costumes during the day, they wouldn't look very good. The effectiveness is at night, seeing that costume burst out from, behind a pillar in the darkness and all that stuff. Like, Halloween Horror Nights are awesome, and those sort of horror-themed nights in various places are normally pretty cool. But still, around the daylight, it's just it looked corny. But I don't know what the planning was there in releasing that footage, because they released it themselves. Um, because it almost then feels like this teaser's been released to then go, okay, guys, this isn't representative of the Wolfman in the film necessarily. Calm down. Feels a little bit of a misstep doing it that way around. I mean, I don't know if Halloween Horror Nights costumes are normally advertised in that way. It could be just because of the anticipation of seeing this film, because whilst the Universal monster films have just kind of been varying degrees of diabolical, there's the infamous new dark universe that failed on the first film, which was The Mummy. But we did get from Lee Whannell The Invisible Man, which was very good. So, and he's got a very good track record. Obviously, he also comes from the world of Insidious and Saw, working with James Wan. So, there's some good pedigree there. I think this should be pretty interesting. Hopefully, it's good. Like I say, I have faith in the director. Don't have as much faith in Universal with their monster films. Although Abigail, I think, was very, very good, and I watched that again recently. Yeah, it's okay. It's going to be interesting though to see what the Wolfman actually looks like in the film. We haven't got a proper glimpse of that yet. Next up, exorcism movie The Ritual, starring Dan Stevens and Al Pacino, is releasing in 2025. Al Pacino, and this is a John Squires write-up, Al Pacino and Dan Stevens are set to lead the cast of the upcoming exorcism horror movie The Ritual from XYZ Films and director David Bedell. Oh, God. I'm going to have to get used to having a microphone right in front of me. I keep knocking it. Variety reports this week that XYZ Films is planning a US theatrical release in 2025. Additionally, Variety notes in today's fresh report that the movie has sold out for most international territories by XYZ Films. Based on true story, the film follows two priests, one questioning his faith, Stevens, and one reckoning with a troubled past, Pacino, who must put aside their differences to save a possessed young woman through a difficult and dangerous series of exorcisms. Variety details the film is an authentic portrayal of Emma Schmidt, an American woman whose demonic possession culminated in harrowing exorcisms. Her case remains the most thoroughly documented exorcism in American history. David Medell and Enrico Natal wrote the screenplay for The Ritual. Emma Schmidt. I wonder if Emma Schmidt was also the basis for the exorcism of Emily Rose. I don't know if that was actually based on a girl called Emily Rose. I don't really look into the true life basis for these exorcism films. Not really my thing usually. Dan Stevens is very good, and Pacino has done some incredible films. I'm not really so sure about recently. He does appear to be in the twilight of his career, which isn't really a knock because he is an older gentleman. But when it comes to exorcism films, if you've heard the show before, you'll know that I kind of feel that outside of the big hitters, they do kind of tread the familiar tropes like a dime a dozen. That being said, I am one of the few people, it would seem, that enjoyed The Exorcist Believer. Not saying it tried to do anything different or the things that it tried to do different were necessarily good, but in terms of a modern exorcism film, me actually enjoying it, yeah, surprisingly. But it isn't a subgenre that I find myself particularly that interested in when there's a new release, because I don't know, it feels like it's going to follow the familiar tropes that I'm not that fussed with. But decent cast, so we'll keep an eye out for it. Now, next up, official Smile 2 poster channels sadistic spirit of Jack Torrance. John Squires. Paramount debuted the official trailer for Parker Finn's upcoming horror sequel, Smile 2, earlier this week, and today they're following up with the latest official poster for the film. Smile 2 opens wide in theatres October 18th, 2024. In Smile 2, about to embark on a new world tour, global pop sensation Sky Riley begins experiencing increasingly terrifying and inexplicable events. Overwhelmed by the escalating horrors and the pressures of fame, Sky is forced to face her dark past to regain control of her life before it spirals out of control. The cast for Smile 2 also includes Carl Gollner, Rosemary DeWitt, Lucas Gage, and Dylan Gelula, alongside Raul Castillo and Miles Gutierrez Riley. The new trailer also reveals that Drew Barrymore will appear in the upcoming sequel. So, I think what I've seen from the trailers so far for Smile 2 is it does look like they've upped the ante in terms of production. The smiles themselves do actually look creepier than the smiles in the original Smile. The thing that I found with Smile, Smile 1, or we'll just call it S1, I'm saying Smile a lot, was that whilst I thought it was a decent film on the first watch, I did think that the smiles themselves in the film weren't as creepy as smiles that I've seen in other horror films. The film itself, though, has grown on me. I've given it a couple of rewatches since it came out, and I have to admit it's massively kind of gone up in my feelings about the film. It does. There are parts of that film that do stick with you, and I think the performances are very good in it. With this sequel, I am hyped to watch it. And as I say, the smiles themselves do look creepier. There's some pretty creepy looking moments in it. But I'm going to be a little bit trepidatious just because of some of the pomp in the sequel, like massive reactions and a lot of the expressions from the lead, Sky Riley, played by Naomi Scott, do look a little bit overblown, potentially. I mean, it's hard to say until I've really kind of seen the film. But my only fear would be that we almost try to go too big and lose some of the terror that was there. It's just something that can happen when when horror films get a sequel and then they try and overdo it. You can't do the same film twice because what's the point? You almost have to kind of go up another level. But I think because of the first film having some really good creepy moments, you just don't want to lose that with jumpy jump scares for the sake of it. I mean, there were jump scares in the first film, but that would be my only concern is the balance still there? Because the original was a bit of a slow burn. It had some creepy moments, and I thought the finale was brilliant. Really, really creepy finale, in my opinion. So, can they repeat that? Well, it's the same director, same writer director, so the possibility is there. Possibility is there. It's a good cast. Carl Gallner's returning. Based on the finale of Smile, I can't imagine for very long. But I'll be interested to check that out. That's out next month. Next up, atmospheric psychological horror title Unholy comes to PlayStation and Xbox on September 13th. It's been over a year, and this is from Mike Wilson, I should say. It's been over a year since Hook and developer Duality Games released their first-person psychological horror title, Unholy, to Steam, with the promise of the console versions at a later date. That date for the console version of Unholy is now set for September 13th for PS5 and Xbox Series. Created by former Painkiller, Bulletstorm, and Gears of War developers, Unholy centers on Dorothea, who's on the search for her young child after they disappear from a decaying post-Soviet town. To do so, Dorothea will need to explore the aforementioned town, as well as the creepy and twisted world of Unholy, a grotesque society ruled by a relentless priest caste. Unholy will feature a unique gameplay mechanic of using 4 different emotions: anger, fear, sadness, and desire to interact with the environment in order to destroy obstacles, trigger mechanisms, overload circuits, and illuminate your way. You can also use these emotions to confuse, lure, or damage your opponents. Driven by an intense narrative, Unholy features visuals based on the works of reputed dark artist and Duality Games founder and art director Tomasz Straczkowski. Everybody in the world of Unholy hides behind a mask, which can be the difference between life or death. You can build your own mask to get new skills or improve your abilities, or wear other masks to infiltrate, confuse your enemies, and impersonate your foes. Ooh, that sounds pretty interesting. It sounds pretty full on. I imagine I'd probably get confused by the various mechanics of the controls, but I'm always down to try new horror, mainly if it's single player. So, I haven't watched the trailer for this. I will just see if I can play it on mute. Just kind of get an idea of the look. Oh god, okay, that already does look quite creepy. And is it first person? That's going to be extra scary. Okay, graphics are pretty nice. There's some puzzles. There's some weird weaponry running around. Looks vaguely familiar, so I wonder if I saw the trailers for this when the PC version came out. Uh, oh, okay, very creepy, very dark. Torchlight, creepy looking monsters. Yeah, okay. It's a possibility. I think I do. I think I vaguely remember seeing this and having a look on Steam. I don't think I could find it on UK Steam. Maybe I jumped the gun. Maybe it's not available in the UK as of yet. But who knows? Next up, we'll skip that. I don't want to talk about Mouseboat Mickey. Mike Flanagan aims to make The Exorcist his scariest movie yet. John Swell's write-up. David Gordon Green's planned The Exorcist trilogy, which began with the poorly received The Exorcist Believer, is no more, with Blumhouse pivoting down a bold new path instead. Mike Flanagan will be directing the next installment in the franchise for Blumhouse, Morgan Creek, and it's already been dated for theatrical release of March 13th, 2026. While plot details are currently under wraps, the new film will tell an all-new story set in the Exorcist universe and is definitely not a sequel to last year's The Exorcist Believer. Flanagan's feature is said to be a radical new take for the franchise, and he teases his vision for the franchise's big screen return in a new chat with the Hollywood Reporter this week. We aren't making this easy on ourselves, Flanagan tells the site, but I've always felt that there's no point in going into a franchise or into a property that monolithic unless there's something new you can bring. I chased The Exorcist very aggressively because I was convinced I had something that I could add. He continues, this is an opportunity to do something that I believe has never been done within the franchise, something that honours what came before it but isn't built on nostalgia. I really just saw an opportunity to make the scariest movie I've ever made. I know expectations are high, no one's more intimidated than I am. Flanagan previously sent the statement The Exorcist is one of the reasons I became a filmmaker, and it's an honour to have the chance to try something fresh, bold, and terrifying within its universe. Reuniting with my friends at Blumhouse, with whom I've made some of my favourite pieces of work, only makes this more exciting. The film will be produced by Trevor Macy on behalf of Intrepid Pictures and Flanagan via his new Red Room Pictures banner. John Scherer will also be working on the film on behalf of Intrepid. The film marks the fourth collaboration for Flanagan and Blumhouse. He wrote and directed Oculus, Hush, and Ouija Origin of Evil, all also produced by Macy. Okay, so. We funnily enough mentioned The Exorcist Believer a bit earlier on. I by no means think it's a great film. I just don't think it's as bad as people made out, and I think it's got some quite creepy moments in it. Some decent, scary visuals, I would even say. The pacing is all over the place in that film. That is true. But I wasn't sad to see that the trilogy wasn't going ahead because, you know, these planned trilogies off the bat, I'm done with. It's like multiverse done with. Expanded universe, I'm just not that interested in. Unless they're film series that I've come to enjoy, and there feels like there could be some interesting crossover that won't be at the detriment of either of them or any of them, then okay, great, but otherwise just not that interested. With The Exorcist, it is a franchise that's a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, the original is an all-time classic. It went from being a film that I would mock to becoming one of my favourites. It's, the third film is pretty good. The second film is absolutely terrible, one of the worst films I've ever seen. The two prequels, I think, are both bad and badder. I don't think either of them are that redeemable. And Exorcist Believer, I enjoyed for the most part, but it's not amazing. With David Gordon Green out, which I think was probably a good move. Mike Flanagan. I guess the only thing that is, I used to be quite a big Mike Flanagan fan, and I found with his TV output, as we've discussed on previous episodes of the show, I've just been less interested to the point that I haven't really watched any of the House of Usher. I've watched bits and pieces of the first episode, but I just haven't been in the mood to sit down and give it a proper go, which is, I should do, but I think it's just because I've become a bit more bored with that style. I don't know if it's the stories or the look, I don't know what it is, but it just hasn't gripped me like earlier works of his have, which is a shame. But from a horror film perspective, I did enjoy Hush and Oculus very much, and I thought Doctor Sleep was pretty good. I don't think it was amazing, but I thought it was pretty good, with some pretty creepy moments in it. So I do think Mike Flanagan is a safe pair of hands. I do hope, though, that it is given an interesting title and isn't a sequel to The Exorcist called The Exorcist. Talked about that before. I don't like that with Halloween films. If it's a sequel, give it a subtitle or call it The Exorcist 7 or something. I don't know. Just don't call it The Exorcist because we've already got The Exorcist. If it's a remake, sure, but it's not. Eddie the Beast in the chat. What would you do if you was in The Exorcist? Probably panic. Probably panic. What can you do when it's demonic possession? It's not like. I think the thing that we've established with The Exorcist and demonic possession films doesn't really seem to be that there's much that you can do to stop it from happening. If it's going to happen, then it's going to happen. You can probably try and limit the potential for inviting that shit into your world if you were in that world where that sort of thing, was prevalent. But I mean, if you're in The Exorcist and you get possessed, your chances are kind of slim to none. I mean, in the original, it's not like the exorcisms worked; they didn't work. A guy had to sacrifice himself to save the soul of the girl. Spoiler alert! I mean, the film's 50 years old, but yeah, it doesn't quite work like that. So yeah, if I was in The Exorcist, goodbye. Screwed. Yeah, screwed. Now we'll do two more bits of news. Next up, another John Squires write-up. The Burbs. Kiki Palmer is starring in a TV series adaptation of Joe Dante's 1989 classic. Joe Dante's dark comedy favourite, The Burbs, is headed to the small screen with a TV series adaptation for Peacock, with Kiki Palmer set to star in the series. Variety reports that The Burb has been ordered straight to series by Peacock. Celeste Huey is adapting Dante's film for television. Here's a particularly cool bit for the website's report. The series will film on the Universal Studios backlot, just like the movie. The show's official synopsis previews, set in present-day suburbia, The Burbs follows a young couple returning to the husband's childhood home. The world is upended when new neighbours move in next door, bringing old secrets of the cul-de-sac to light and new deadly threats to shatter the illusion of their quiet little neighbourhood. Seth MacFarlane will executive produce along with Brian Grazer of Image Entertainment. Kiki Palmer is starring and is also executive producing. So The Burbs is one of those little favourites that used to appear on TV back when I was younger, and whenever it did, I'd always be like, "Oh, give this a watch." And I think it's because the first time I ever caught a bit of The Burbs, it was on, I don't know, Channel 4, maybe ITV late one night, and it was during a moment when Tom Hanks's character is having a nightmare. I think he's fallen asleep watching the TV, and in that nightmare, Leatherface attacks him. I remember thinking, "What the? Is this another Texas Chainsaw Massacre film that I'm not familiar with?" And then ever since that point, whenever it's on TV, I'd go, "Oh, give it a watch." And funny enough, my fiance, who's a Tom Hanks fan, hasn't actually ever seen The Burbs, so that'll give me an excuse to rewatch it at some point, to give her a first-time viewing. But the TV series adaptation, I guess the positives is this will hopefully turn a new generation of fans on to The Burbs. I think it just really depends on how it balances the dark comedy with the notes of horror. It's not a horror film, but it's got moments of peril and themes of horror underneath. But it is essentially a comedy, a dark comedy. That's the kind of the heart and soul of it. So if things can do the balance well, basically, I just hope it doesn't take itself too seriously. And at the same point, it doesn't lean far too much into comedy and just joke after joke. I mean, it does have Seth MacFarlane attached. I do like, for the most part, Seth MacFarlane. I grew up with Family Guy and American Dad. Haven't watched them for quite a few seasons, but, for the most part, I was a regular watcher of them, for my sins. And I did enjoy the Orville, and I've enjoyed the Ted films and the Ted series more recently. Was actually very good, I thought. But it's got to hold that balance of dark comedy with a bit of the scares. Whether it can do that, I'm not sure. But yeah, we shall see. And then finally on the news, oh god, I saw this trailer today from John Squires on Blood Disgusting. Uzumaki. Watch the nightmarish full trailer for Adult Swim's Junji Ito anime series. The Adult Swim miniseries Uzumaki, based on the supernatural horror manga by legendary author Junji Ito, is headed our way this month, and the full official trailer has arrived. Uzumaki debuts on September 28th on Adult Swim, followed by next day streaming on Max. The official trailer is online now. Written and illustrated by Ito, the original manga series told the story of the citizens of Kurozu-cho, a fictional city that's plagued by a supernatural curse involving spirals. The Uzumaki manga series is made up of... I shouldn't drink a beer. It's made up of 3 volumes that were first published in 1998. It follows the story of high school student Kirigoshima, who lives in the cursed town of Kurozu-cho, described as a small fog-bound town located on the coast of Japan. The manga received a live-action feature adaptation in 2000, which I've still never got around to watching. I've not heard it's very good. Most recently, Ito's work received another anime adaptation in Netflix Junji Ito Maniac, Japanese Tales of the Macabre anthology series. Directed by Hiroshi Nagahama, the series will feature music by Hereditary's Colin Stetson. As a huge fan of Junji Ito, I'm thrilled to be able to tackle one of his signature works with a team of amazing creators who are all equally devoted to doing justice to this monumental work of horror manga, said Jason DeMarco, Adult Swim Toonami's creative director. Oh, God, that's a mouthful. Okay, so I have read Uzumaki. Until recently, I've had the complete collection book. I think I ended up selling it because once I've read it, I was like, I'm not going to reread that. It is very good. I do feel the ending wasn't that... I didn't really like the ending to it. It kind of felt like it's just... things are just going to get worse and worse until the whole thing is a shit show. And that's kind of how it went without giving too much away. That being said, the artwork is incredibly detailed. It's incredibly disturbing in places. Like some of the things that occur relating to these spirals are just messed up. There's people turning into snails, which is as it sounds. There's people's hair spiraling out into just masses and masses and masses of spirals before they just end up getting caught on phone lines. A woman develops a spiral on her forehead that eventually creates like a burrowed kind of screw drill hole into her head that her eye spins around, and it's just, how does someone think of this? But this trailer for the show does look like it's going to be incredibly authentic, incredibly accurate to the source material. It's in black and white as per the manga. And it does look like it's essentially lifted straight from the page. Very, very accurate to the source material, I would say. I will probably check this out, but I mean, I don't really watch manga very often. I kind of need to be told when manga is available on normal sources that is worth watching. And when I say that is worth watching, I mean that is worth watching and isn't going to be 70 plus episodes and I need to see 4 other different series before it to really all make sense. Don't have the time for that. I would just like one season, and if there are follow-up seasons, great. But if there's one season that has a good story and it doesn't go on for 50 episodes, sure, okay. I did enjoy Junji Ito Maniac, Japanese Tales of the Macabre. Typically with an anthology series, some episodes are better than others, but on the whole, it was quite creepy. Like the episode where people's heads are turning into these massive balloons that hang people. It was just, that was pretty disturbing. Then there's the ice cream van that was turning people into like ice cream sludge. Crazy. But that is it, Ghouls and Fiends, for the horror news. That was the news. Ho, 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 ho.
step on me again, I'll gut you like a fish, understand?
Good lord. Don't know why I downed that. Didn't need to down that beer. Didn't need to do it. The idea that we were going to talk about for a follow-on from the show to keep the show returning to its watch party roots was to do a watch along. Watch parties don't exist on Twitch anymore, but doing a watch along. It's a pretty quiet night tonight. I started a bit later than I wanted to, so we'll probably hold off on trying the watch party. It's a bit quiet going, and it's a bit of a commitment if it's not gonna work or be worth the time. So we'll hold off on trying to do a watch party, not a watch party, fucking hell, a watch along for another occasion. But we're here to do some reviews, and we have one review for a new film this week, and that is Hell Hole. You may have got a hint from earlier on in regards to what kind of score I might give this, but I'll try not to bury the lead too much. So, Hell Hole 2024 is a new horror film from directors John Adams, Toby Poser, written by John Adams, Lulu Adams, and Toby Poser, starring Toby Poser, John Adams, and Maximum Portman. Maximum Portman. Their name's Maximum. Oh. Cool, I didn't know. Okay. Fine. You learn something new, hey? You learn something new. Hellholes. So, as per usual, I'll give a little bit of a blurb. They don't have a Wikipedia page, so it is very much just a very brief one-sentence synopsis. I'll talk about the highs, the lows, and what score I'm going to give it out of 10. So Hellhole hails from the filmmaking family behind Hellbender and centers on an American-led fracking crew that uncovers a living French soldier frozen in time from a Napoleonic campaign, whose body hosts a parasitic monster. So the film opens, well, it says there, Napoleonic sort of time, but yeah, 1800s, I believe, where a woman who I guess could be viewed as a potential witch is bringing a horse along to some soldiers for them to sacrifice, I think. Before these sort of tentacles start shooting out of it, causing people to explode and jumping from body to body and causing anarchy. And straight off the bat, within 5 minutes, I'll give some respect, but it gives you a clear indication of what kind of sort of film this is going to be. And I appreciate being advised early on as to the quality level of the film. I don't mean that to be disparaging, because I watch a lot of films of varying standards of production quality that can still turn out to be incredible. This isn't one of them. The CGI gore effects that they're just quite bad. And again, this film follows the same kind of sensibility of this garage rock soundtrack style, but I guess their authentic Addams Family feel. And I can respect that if that's your background, your culture. I mean, I imagine if I was making films when I, was very much in my not in my heavy metal phase, because I still love heavy metal, but when I was playing guitar every day and I was in a thrash metal band, I imagine my kind of soundtrack would be very metal orientated. So I do understand that. But I think if you're going to have that vibe, it's got to kind of almost fit with the story you're telling. Now, they had this garage rock vibe in Hellbender, but in amongst the stories of the witchcraft, you have this relationship of sheltering between a mother and her daughter, where the mother is trying to, from memory, shelter her daughter from the outside world. So they've got their own sort of two-person rock group, garage rock group. So that kind of played in with the theme tune. The soundtrack of the film was kind of mixed in with the sort of music that they were playing. I did get that. It did sort of contrast with some of the scenes later on as they started bringing in the horror, as I mentioned earlier on, but it kind of made sense there. Here, you've got this Napoleonic opening, or Napoleonic setting opening, suddenly jumping to this garage rock music. And then when we jump forward to present day, we've still got that. It's almost to give like a punk rock feel to when the monster is attacking and killing people. I get it. I don't really like it, gonna be honest. Performance wise, no one is particularly good in this. I am struggling for positives. I didn't give Hellbender a very high score. I can't remember what I gave Hellbender, but I preferred that to this. Like, this film just it dragged in places, and it's only an hour and a half. That's not great. I was waiting for this film to end, which is really harsh to say, but Eddie in the chat says, kind of looks like one of those Demogorgons from Stranger Things. Yeah, the artwork makes it look like it could be a Demogorgon. It's not, it's a little squid. It's a little squid for the most part that just appears, takes over people, and then moves on. You know, it's basically like The Thing if it was made for The Thing was made for a fiver and didn't understand tension. I can't give this a great score. It just wasn't very good. And I know that's not really a very complex way of reviewing a film, but it was just boring. The effects were crap. The music just did not really gel with what was going on with the narrative. Like it didn't really work. The setting was okay. This fracking area, but it was essentially just a building and then the outside. There was no kind of particular areas that were made to feel ominous or made to feel foreboding. There's no tension in this film. There's no scares. It's not a scary film in that regard. It's more, I guess, comedy horror, but it's one of those comedy horrors where it just isn't really funny. Jokes don't really land in any sort of way. Bloody hell, like a squid apocalypse, Eddie said. Yeah, pretty much. I'm giving it 3.5 out of 10. I can't give it any higher than that. I just didn't really enjoy it. It's on Shudder. If you have a Shudder subscription, you might want to give it a go. I'm not recommending it though. I have had a couple of screener links for new films to review. That'll be coming next week. When I got around to getting updated on the screeners, I just didn't have time to watch them and give them a proper review today. But unfortunately, the one film this week I did have time to watch wasn't very good. So Hellhole, 3.5 out of 10. Not great. That's it for the reviews. Grab some water. We're now going to go to our featured presentation. So, we are finally doing the feature presentation. And we're going to talk about something that was mentioned a little while ago. So, regular listeners of the show will know that I have become a bit of a fan over the years of Italian horror. Where did this start, really? So, my first Italian horror would have probably been a Fulci film that I didn't really like at the time, and that was... no, Eddie, in the chat, there wasn't a ghost, it was a loud bang. The first Fulci film I saw was Zombie 2. Zombie Flesh Eaters, whatever you want to call it. Wasn't a big fan of it at the time. I saw it again quite recently and actually thought it was much better than I remembered. I think the version I saw must have been heavily cut. So it just seemed unnecessarily grim for the sake of it without the context. I mean, it is still grim because it's a Fulci film, but I digress. But then since that point, Italian horror never really featured that prominently in the available markets, for me anyway, in the UK. TV wouldn't really stream it, Sky TV. Bravo would sometimes have horror films. I've talked before that what was originally the Sci-Fi, spelled traditional way, Sci-Fi channel, would always have classic horror films, classic sequels, straight to DVD sequels. It was a really great education for horror for me. invaluable, I would say. I mean, in these days, you've got streaming, you've got access to a lot more things, which is great. But I do still feel that when your options are more limited, you are more likely to be able to see and discover some really good stuff. Whereas when you have way too much option, too many options, there's more potential to spend too long looking and not make a decision, which happens to me quite often, or to make a decision and go, yeah, this looks like it could be good, and then it's absolute dog crap. That's always a risk. That is always a risk. But I digress. I then, over the years, had heard about Dario Argento. Came to watch Suspiria because I think I'd heard it mentioned a few times in best horror lists and saw it on Prime. Fell in love with it on the first viewing. I've got like 2 copies of it on Blu-ray. There's like a 2K edition and an original edition on Blu-ray. Very, very good. But Fulci is a name similar to like Mario Bava that I'd always hear about but wouldn't see that much of. Until seeing which one would have been actually my first? I think, speaking of TV, I actually had seen City of the Living Dead on TV and just thought, holy shit, this is nasty. Like, this is zombies done for actual scares. And I think the reason that I kind of say that is because up until that point, you had Return of the Living Dead, which is pretty funny. It's not necessarily scary. There's a couple of creepy moments, but it's generally quite a funny zombie film. Yeah, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and at that point, I don't think I'd seen Day of the Dead, which is actually my favourite. Where again, there are some creepy moments, but it's not especially like, oh my god, fucking terrifying. But then seeing City of the Living Dead, there's just this mixture of the nastiness of the gore is one thing. And that's something that I think with Fulci, if you've only seen bits and pieces, you could say, oh, it's just gore for the sake of it. And in some instances, in some scenes, yes, I would agree with that, actually. But it is the eye for cinematography for creating these terrifying locations which create isolation, and having these just grotesque looking zombies, killers, ghouls that just slumber towards the trapped, in most instances, protagonist or unlucky victim before just gruesomely murdering them. But the scary moments aren't the kills, it's the moments leading up to that. And you've got this gorgeous Italian score in each of the films, I'd say, done. The score is probably the highlight and the beyond, but we'll kind of get to all 3 films shortly. But there's just this really neat way of building moments of terror. Now, all 3 films aren't start to finish classics, I will say that. And that might be sacrilegious to Fulci fans, but hey, we all have our opinions. But for me, the standout is the opening in this unofficial trilogy, because I'll just mention that the reason that they're kind of a trilogy, they all focus on varying degrees of gates of hell in terms of the location is of each film is to varying areas. It's either the location or it's the act that can act as a quote unquote gate to hell, which is the moment when the dead walk the earth, that hell can invade the living. That's kind of your gist here. Eddie in the chat, Shaun the Dead 2, or was that too early? So no, Shaun of the Dead I'd have probably seen a bit later on. Shaun of the Dead, I was already a bit of a seasoned horror fan, and I definitely had already seen Day of the Dead at that point, because there's a kill to Dylan from Black Books, I can't remember his surname, which is straight out of Day of the Dead. And I remember seeing Shaun of the Dead at the cinema, and when that death happened, I was like, oh, it's the Day of the Dead kill, it's the Day of the Dead kill. So Shaun of the Dead was early in my horror fandom, but a bit later in terms of me watching a variety of different horror or zombie films specifically at that point. Um, but all of these Lucio Fulci films, the things that connect them is that all three films star Catriona MacColl as a leading character. They're all written by Fulci and Dardano Sacchietti, with Giorgio Maruzio co-writing on The Beyond and The House by the Cemetery. City of the Living Dead and The Beyond were both scored by Fabio Frizzi, which I think his score is a real standout. And House of by the Cemetery had a score composed by both Walter Rizzati and Alessandro Blanksteiner. I think House by the Cemetery is probably the weakest of the three, just in terms of. I mean, the difficulty of saying it's the weakest when there's a lot good there, but we'll jump into that. We'll start with City of the Living Dead. City of the Living Dead, Fear in the City of the Living Dead is also another title for it. Also released as The Gates of Hell, is a 1980 Italian supernatural horror film co-written and directed by Lucio Fulci. Let's just put that artwork on screen. It stars Christopher George, Catriona MacColl, Carlo Di Maio, Antonella Intelenghi, Giovanni Lombardo Radice, and Janet Argent. The film follows a priest whose suicide opens a gateway to hell that releases the undead. A psychic and a reporter team up to close it before All Saints' Day. City of the Living Dead was developed after the financial success of Fulci's previous film, Zombie 2, leading him to work with screenwriter Dardano Sacchietti to write a new horror film inspired by the works of H.P. Lovecraft. The film was greenlit during Prince's production of Contraband, which Fulci left to begin working on City of the Living Dead. Principal photography was shot predominantly on location in the United States, with interiors shot in Rome. So, talk a little bit about the plot. In New York City, during a seance held in the apartment of medium Teresa, Mary Woodhouse experiences a vision of a priest, Father Thomas, hanging himself in a cemetery of a village called Dunwich. Mary breaks the circle and collapses to the floor when the images overwhelm her. The group presumes Mary is dead and calls the police, who suspect foul play. Teresa warns the police chief of an imminent evil. Journalist Peter Bell begins to investigate Mary's death and visits her grave as she is about to be buried. Meanwhile, however, she is still alive, and Peter saves her after hearing her cries. It's a very, very good scene where it's like, in saving her, he almost decapitates her. However, she's still alive. Peter saves her after hearing her cries. Peter and Mary visit Teresa, who says that according to the ancient book of Enoch, which is a book of the dead, or it's a book of relating to the 7 keys to the gates of hell, something like that. The events I have read the Satanic Bible at one point. Shits and giggles. The events Mary witnessed in her visions presage the eruption of the living dead into our world. Father Thomas's death has opened the gates of hell, and the invasion will commence on the upcoming All Saints' Day. So, from there, we get some insane kills in this film. I mean, this really for me is probably my favorite. Well, not probably, it is my favorite Lucio Fulci film. I think the zombies in this are scary as fuck. They sort of seem to phase in and out of existence, like they kind of almost teleport. And I'm sure on a few characters they do this kill, which always freaked me out when it occurred many, many years later in Twin Peaks: The Return, the David Lynch series. There's a particular episode which shows the Woodmen, these kind of beings in black and white, who just seem to be covered in ash. And one of them appears at this radio station to send out this message that causes everyone to fall asleep. It's a very weird episode, but it's absolutely incredible cinema for a TV episode. But during that, this being basically puts his hand in the back of someone's skull, and you've got this horrible, the sound design's incredible, this horrible squelching, crunching sound, where his hand is basically just in this guy's skull, crushing his brain just on and off. It's really nasty, but he's doing this while saying this radio message. And I'm pretty sure that some of the deaths in this, because this is the one that I haven't been able to rewatch, or haven't had time to rewatch, are similar, follow a similar trajectory. Really, really, really gory. If you're watching on screen, there's some artwork for a 4K Blu-ray release, and yep, someone gets their head held in front of this kind of power drilling device that screws into their head. Just there's some really there's another person whose eyes start bleeding. Just it's if you have a faint heart when it comes to gore, like if the thought of watching the Terrifier films is an absolute 100% no, never going to happen, which is understandable, then the Lucio Fulci films may not be for you. I mean, it is the 80s. The effects themselves aren't quite as slick as modern day gore effects. Obviously, it's a different time, different budgets, but there's just a real nastiness mixed in with some great music, some great synth. I think similar to all of his films in the trilogy, there's a great job of building to the finale. The thing with these films is we never get to the third act and it falls over like a bit of a damp squib. This one, we basically almost take a trip into hell. We go into a crypt to try and find the corpse, or the living corpse, of this priest who, in killing himself, has opened the gates to hell. And in doing so, they descend into this labyrinth of open graves inside a crypt, where various various zombies are appearing out from the cobwebs, and it's just he just has this real knack of creating paranoia and claustrophobia. And by creating these terrifying visions and forcing characters to be backed against a wall, and there isn't suddenly there's a trap door, or there's a surprise ladder to get out of here. Like, more often than not so much in this finale, but more often than not in these sequences in his films, there isn't a way out, and your guns to die in variously disgusting ways. Now, because I haven't been able to watch this film recently, I can't remember the eye death in this. And I mention that because Lucio Fulci, part of his shtick was eye gore. I mean, for Zombie 2, there's an infamous scene involving a head being slowly pushed or pulled towards a sticking out splintered bit of wood. And you do see that splintered bit of wood pierce and dismember the eye. I can't remember what the eye scene is. I'm sure fans, if you've seen this film, will know. And I've no doubt that there must be an infamous eye gouging or whatever in this. There has to be. It's Lucio Fulci. But I definitely feel that City of the Living Dead for me is the tippy top, starting off strong in 1980. Now, next up, in 1981, came The Beyond, which I actually watched earlier on today. I've seen it before, but I gave it a rewatch. The Beyond, 1981, English language Italian Southern Gothic supernatural horror film directed by Lucio Fulci, based on an original story created by Dodando Sacchetti, starring Catriona McCall and David Warbeck. Its plot follows a woman who inherits a hotel in rural Louisiana that was once the site of a horrific murder, and which may be a gateway to hell. Filmed on location in and around New Orleans in late 1980 with assistance from the Louisiana Film Commission. Additional photography took place at Depuy Studios in Rome. It's also had the title of Seven Doors of Death. This version with that title featured an entirely different musical score and ran several minutes shorter than Fulci's original cut, and was branded a video nasty immediately upon its release in the United Kingdom. The original version of the film saw its first United States release in September 1998 through a distribution partnership between Rolling Thunder Pictures, Grindhouse Releasing, and Cowboy Booking International. So, we'll jump into the plot. 1927. An artist and warlock, Schweck, works on a painting in room 36 of the Seven Doors Hotel in New Orleans, Louisiana. He protects one of the seven gates of hell, which, if opened, will bring about the end of the world and the death of mankind. He is dragged from his room by a lynch mob to the hotel basement and killed for practicing black magic. Meanwhile, a white-eyed woman reads from the ancient tome Ebon, prophesizing the opening of one of the seven gates of hell. Now, I'll just jump off the plot for a moment. That death is nasty. I'm sure he gets an eye gouged out. He gets whipped in the face with the cat of nine tails. Essentially has his palms or wrists hammered through against a wall. I'm sure there's like acid or something poured on his, something burns off half his face. It's a real nasty death. Jump forward to 1981. Lisa Morrell inherits the hotel and moves from New York City to refurbish and reopen it. A worker later glimpses a white-eyed woman through a window and falls off his scaffolding. Local Dr. John McCabe takes the injured man to hospital. The bell for room 36 rings, but as the hotel has yet to open, Lisa dismisses it as malfunctioning. A plumber, Joe, later investigates the lack of running water. In the flooded basement, he uncovers a bricked-off area and accidentally opens the gate to hell. He is attacked by a ghoul, blinded, and killed. The bodies of both Joe and Schweck are discovered by a maid, Martha, and are taken to the local hospital morgue. So straight off the bat, we've got an eye gouge here. This ghoul, the body of Schweck, thrusts its hand out into Joe's face and basically pops his eye out. It's grisly as anything. It just... And then from there, I think the eye attacks come thick and fast. As the film progresses and we start seeing more and more encounters of people being stunned and then grisly murdered, one guy, I can't remember what knocks him to the ground, but he suddenly becomes almost like he's had a stroke or something, falls to the ground, I think it's electrocuted, and then all of a sudden tarantulas start pouring out from somewhere to crawl across him. They eat out one of his eyes, eats like his nose off, and then one of them approaches his tongue and starts eating his tongue out. Like, yeah, the tarantulas that are walking towards him do look quite crappy, but then it is interspersed with actual tarantulas. And I mean, it is a full-on scene because it's all close-ups of these like teeths and fangs just ripping apart eyes. It's just oh, Eddie in the chat, oh my, at least I'm not eating right now. Yeah, I mean, it's not light viewing. I can't stress that enough. As the film progresses and we get to our finale, this time we get this really cool glimpse, essentially, of hell. So the painting that's being worked on earlier in the film by Schweck is showing basically this desolate, grey, ashy landscape with bodies everywhere, all in the same colour tone. And as the gate of hell has been opened, the dead are starting to rise, and especially when we get to this morgue where all these dead bodies have been taken, they all start rising up. We get some great gore effects in this one. There's a part where this little girl suddenly reveals herself to be part of these kind of almost like deadites, where they have these white eyes. She suddenly tries to hold back our main character and just gets her head shot off, and it just explodes everywhere. And that's one of the best effects in the film. I mean, it sounds a bit grisly talking about it considering the context, but in terms of effects work, it's very well done. And as we kind of progress from there, there's a moment where a window explodes inwards towards one of these side characters who just gets a face full of glass, like it all just slashes through his face. The effects work on this is kind of second to none, I would have to say. I think with this, it probably has some of the best deaths. Well, it has some of the most inventive eye stuff in the series, I will say. I still think City of the Living Dead's got the best deaths. The music is great. I think there could have been a bit more with the story. It did seem to sort of flow from just one death to another without kind of building enough towards the finale before we got there. It's a minor quibble, like it is still a great film, but I feel that's just one of the things that City does a bit better than The Beyond, and why City is kind of a tippy top, I suppose. But it's a very cinematic film in terms of some of the artistry in play, and there are some incredible moments of cinematography in this Just some really, really beautiful shots. Definitely one to watch. And then the final part of the Gates of Hell trilogy, possibly the first one I saw, and that is The House by the Cemetery, or Quelle Ville Accanto el Cimitero. There you go. It's in 1981, so he released 2 films in the same year. That's mental. Horror film directed by Lucio Fulci. The film stars Catriona McCall, Paolo Malco, Ina Pereiro, Giovanni Frezzo, Silvia Colatino, and Dagmar Lassander. Plot revolves around a series of murders committed by a ghoulish and demonic serial killer taking place in a New England home that happens to be hiding a gruesome secret within its basement walls. So, jumping into the plot, a woman looks for her boyfriend in an abandoned house. After discovering his body stabbed with scissors, she is killed with a French knife and dragged through a cellar door by a monstrous figure. Meanwhile, little Bob Boyle and his parents, Norman and Lucy, move into a house in New York City. Norman's ex-colleague, Dr. Peterson, who murdered his mistress before committing suicide, was the previous owner. The Boyles are to stay there while Norman researches old houses. As his mother packs, Bob notices a girl in her house's photograph. In New Whitby, Boston, Bob waits in his parents' car while they collect the house keys. The girl from the photograph, May Freudstein, appears across the street and warns him to stay away. Only Bob can see her. In a real estate office, Mrs. Laura Getlinson is annoyed when her colleague hands the couple the Freudstein keys. She insists it is called Oak Mansion and promises to find the Boyles a babysitter. Okay, so the main reason why this one jumps down my list a fair bit is Bob, and it isn't necessarily his fault because he is dubbed. He's a little kid, little blonde kid, but whoever they had in to dub Bob did an awful job. He is so fucking annoying in this film. And again, I haven't heard the original dubbing. I haven't watched it with subtitles for the original dubbing. I've just heard the dubbed version that's available on Shudder. And I probably owned a copy of this on DVD back in the day, many, many years ago. But that would have been a dubbed edition as well. But the voice actor that did the dubbing for Bob, terrible. Absolutely terrible. Really annoying. I will say with this, it's probably the slowest of the 3 in terms of building the narrative, which didn't leave me a little bored in the first half of the film, I will say. And that probably isn't helped by Bob being the central character and him being annoying as piss. But once the story does develop, this does have one of the better stories. I think the story in this is slightly better than The Beyond. We find that there is a crypt in the house. There's a gravestone, essentially, above the basement, which is locked off. The basement has been locked away, you can't open it. And there's this gravestone. Just not gravestone, it's this like kind of tomb entrance that can't be opened. But once the kills start happening in the latter part of the film, like, they are pretty nasty. So the killer in this, Freudstein, is basically this decaying man filled with maggots who murdered his family and found a way to stay alive and to stave off death. And that is by killing, basically, victims and taking their organs to sustain his life. He doesn't really have a face. His face looks like a gas mask. And his body's fallen apart, but he is just a nasty man. The camera angles, there's a lot of POV shots in this, and the basement itself, which is kind of Dr. Freudstein's lab, almost, is one of those just creepy set pieces. And it does such a good job of having these moments when you've got people trying to escape, and that happens a few times in the films. It doesn't get to the point of it being too repetitive. We have a couple of these moments where Bob is stuck in the basement, and you've just got this POV of something with this horrible sound coming over the top of like laboured breathing. It's POV of something heading towards the staircase slowly while he's panicking. He can't get the door unlocked. Similarly, later on in the film, when his mum is trying to go up this tiny, steep staircase to find another way out through the broken lid of the crypt that won't open. And you can just then get almost her POV looking down of Freudstein missing his hand now after having his hand cut off by her husband, slowly making his way towards her. Can't remember the eye part in this, but there definitely is an eye death in this. I can't remember who gets an eye gouged out. Let me do a Control F on here. Eye. None. Okay, well, maybe on Wikipedia it doesn't say it. Someone definitely gets their eye done in House by the Cemetery. I don't necessarily get the ending. I feel it's essentially to say that Bob has died, or he's been saved from experiencing a nasty death at the hands of Freudstein by Freudstein's ghost daughter, who's sort of been a bit of a guide, and her ghost mother, because it ends up being in this kind of apparent ghost world at the end. But yeah, I think that's better than showing a child getting murdered by this absolutely horrible monster. But I think that's what the implication is. It isn't really very clear, but I think that's kind of what they were going for. I will have to say this probably ranks at the bottom of the three. I think it is very much kind of almost quality as the order of release. Top one, House, City of the Living Dead, then The Beyond, and then House by the Cemetery for me is third. I just felt that whilst the story was pretty good in this one, and the kills were pretty decent in terms of just peril and tension was done really well, I found it was more boring, dull in the first half. I found Bob's voiceover work was just too much. It was just too much. It was just really, really, really bad. I can't say more than that. But that brings us to the end of this discussion on Lucio Fulci films. If you're a fan of Fulci, if you're looking to get started, you've got 3 films to pick from here. Drop us a message on the Discord. We're part of the we've got a Ministry of Horror Discord page, which is part of the Wrestling Arena. Just, I don't know, look on Discord. I don't know how it works. X is Ministry_Horror. TikTok is Ministry of Horror. I occasionally put up clips of the show on there or some gameplay clips. Check it out. Book Talk occasionally. My dogs. People seem to love them, which is great. And then, yeah, Instagram is Tez Elliott. Check it out. We will have another show next week. It'll be a recorded show, back to the reviews. As per, we're going to get back into that kind of schedule of every other week, ideally. And we will jump into Alien Isolation. If not next week, then it'll be the week after. But we will get to the point of seeing an alien in that game. I'm determined. I'm playing it on novice mode, so I don't really have an excuse not to find a xenomorph and hopefully not get killed by it. But thank you very much for watching. As mentioned earlier on, we were going to be doing a watch along. I'm a bit tired. We're having a bit of a quiet night, so we won't do the watch along, watch party type thing tonight. We'll hold that off for another night, and we will take it from there. But thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening on podcast platforms. This is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Be sure to follow on your podcast platform of choice, and I'll upload this to YouTube. Be sure to check out the YouTube Ministry of Horror. The logo is right there. Find the channel, give it a subscribe, keep those views up. Anyway, thanks very much for watching Ghouls and Fiends. I'll catch you next time. Goodbye.